Lila koilo shinanda nandan. Jayo Radhe Jayo Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shinanda Yasoda Jaya Jaya Gopagan Shidamadi Jaya Jaya Denu Vatsagan. Shidamadi Jaya Jaya Denu Vatsagan. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Jaya Prishabhanu Jaya Kirtida Sundari Jaya Purnamasi Jaya Abhiranagari. Jaya Purnamasi Jaya Abhiranagari. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Jaya Rama Gata Jaya Rohini Nandan Jaya Jaya Vrindavasi Jata Jan. Jaya Jaya Vrindavana Basi Jata Jan. Jaya Jaya Vrindavana Basi Jata Jan. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Jaya Dvijapatni Jaya Naga Kanyagan Bhakti Teja Hara Pailo Govinda Charan. Bhakti Teja Hara Pailo Govinda Charan. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Govinda Gopala Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Rasa Mandala Jaya Jaya Radha Shyam Jaya Jaya Rasa Lila Sarva Manoram. Jaya Jaya Rasa Halila Sarva Manora. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Jayudvaja Jaya Jaya Jayudvaja Rasa Savarasa Sarpadika Avejaha Brajate Prachar. Jaya Jayudvaja Rasa Savarasa Sarpadika Avejaha Brajate Prachar. Parakiya Bhavejaha Brajate Brajat. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Janava Pada Padma Koriya Smaran Dina Krishna Dase Kohe Nama Sankirtan. Dina Krishna Dase Kohe Nama Sankirtan. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Tagore Premanandi Ki Jai. You want to sing? Good. Put this one here. Okay.
Let's do Radha Krishna Prana. Oh, can I have one of this, please? I want to learn this. I loved it. Can I have? Huh?
That's my own tune.
Yeah. I want to save this.
So you have the words? No.
No, I don't. Oh, yeah.
Is that high enough?
No, it's perfect. Radha Krishna Prana Mora Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamo Yugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Prana Mora Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamo Yugala Kishore
Jibane marane kate har nahi mora
Jivane Mara Devani Paro Nahi Mo
Jibane marane kate har nahi mora
Jivane Mara Gati Aro Nahi Mo
Radha Krishna Prana Mora Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamo Yugala Kishore
Kalindira Kole Kele Kadambira Vana
Kalindira Kale Keli Kadambira Kana
Kalindira Kole Kele Kadambira Vana
Kalindira Kule Keli Kadambira Kana
Ratana Vidira Par Basabdu Jana
Kanandera Meditra Prara Vosavadu Jana
Ratana Vidira Pas Basabdu Jana
Ratana Meditra Prara Vosavadu Jana
Radha Krishna Prana Mora Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamo Yugala Kishore
Jibane marane gate har nahi mora
Jivane Mara Gati Aro Nahi Mo
Radha Krishna Prana Mora Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamo Yugala Kishore
Sham Gauri Hange দেব চন্দনের গন্ধ
শ্যাম করি অঙ্গে দিব চন্দনের গন্ধ
শ্যাম করে অঙ্গে দেব চন্দনের গন্ধ
শ্যাম করে অঙ্গে দিব চন্দনের গন্ধ
ছমার দুলাব কবে হেরি মুখ চন্দ্র
শ্যামার দুলাভ কবে হেরি মুখ চন্দ্র
ছমার দুলাব কবে হেরি মুখ চন্দ্র
শ্যামার দুলাভ কবে হেরি মুখ চন্দ্র
রাধা কৃষ্ণ প্রাণ মোর যুগল কিশোর
রাধা কৃষ্ণ প্রাণ মোর যুগল কিশোর
গতি অমরতি মন তিবদনার কলে
বাতিয়া মালা তিরমালা দিব দোয়ারে
গতি অমরতি মন তিবদনার কলে
বাতিয়া মালা তিরমালা দিব দোহারে
আধারে তুলিয়া দেব কর্পূর তাম্বুলে
আধারে তুলিয়া দিব কর্পূর তাম্বুলে
আধারে তুলিয়া দেব কর্পূর তাম্বুলে
আধারে তুলিয়া দিব কর্পূর তাম্বুলে
রাধা কৃষ্ণ প্রাণ মোর যুগল কিশোর
রাধা কৃষ্ণ প্রাণ মোরে যুগল কিশোর
ললিতা বিশাখাদি যত সখী বৃন্দ
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 অজ্ঞান করিব সেব চরণার বৃন্দ
অজ্ঞায় করিব সেবা চরণর বৃন্দ
অজ্ঞান করিব সেব চরণার বৃন্দ
অজ্ঞায় করিব সেবা চরণর বৃন্দ
রাধা কৃষ্ণ প্রাণ মোর যুগল কিশোর
রাধা কৃষ্ণ প্রাণ মোর যুগল কিশোর
শ্রীকৃষ্ণ চৈতন্য প্রভু দাসের দাস
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 সেবাভিলাষ করে নরোত্তম দাস
সেবা অভিলাষ করে নরোত্তম দাস
সেবাভিলাষ করে নরোত্তম
Narudamodasa
Radha Krishna Prana Moro Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamor Yugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Prana Moro Jugala Kishore
Radha Krishna Pranamor Yugala Kishore.
Thank you so much.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Have a single symbol.
When do you want me to start?
Bhajans are 5.
Saturday. Okay. I'll be here this Sunday. I'll bring my book too. Yeah, I'm just
Bring extra sheets.
Oh, yeah.
Haribo.
Haribo.
No.
The sound system is amazing.
Much better now.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's because of the microphones.
I'll be here Sunday.
Haribo.
I'll be here tomorrow too.
Yeah. Okay. श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया Bilyani ke mera sunam ke tandulam Prema se boga lagayo rasiya श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया दुर्योधन के मेवा त्यागी सागा विदुरा गरकाओ रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया ऐसो भोगा लगाओ मेरे रसिया प्रेमामृत बना जय रसिया राधा रानी के आदरण दारी ओरा सारा सबना रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया जो कोई इस बोध को पाई शीतेरो मन जय रसिया जो कोई सबोध को पाई तेरे ही गुण गे रसिया मेरा के प्रभु गिरिधारण कर आकर तारा सदिखाओ रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन रसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया श्याम रसिया मेरे मन बसिया रुचि रुचि भोग लगो रसिया Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Rama, Hare Hare. Shamarasya Vede Manabasya Ruchi Ruchi Bhogalagorasya. O Shyam Sundar, you dwell in my heart. Kindly accept this humble food offering of mine. You accepted the offering of wild plums by Shabri, as well as the puffed rice of Sudama. You rejected the delicacies offered to you by Duryodhana in favor of the simple fare at the house of Vidura. My beloved Shyam, make this food veritable nectar by partaking of it first. Make this food even more delicious by touching it to the lips of Sri Radharani. Make it so that whoever tastes this blessed food becomes yours and starts singing your glories. O Giridhari Nagar, one who lifted the Govardhan mountain, please come and give us your darshan as you did to your dear devotee Mira. Haribo, Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto. Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th Canto, and we're reading in the chapter Lord Krishna returns to the city of Hastinapur. So we finished that. Now today we're going to read the deliverance of Sisupala. You notice when it said the deliverance of Jarasandha, and now it's a deliverance of Sisupala. Actually, Krishna kills Jarasandha and he kills Sisupala. So how is it their deliverance? Well, when one is killed by Krishna, they're liberated eternally. So this is the difference between a materialist, like you can say, Saddam Hussein killed so-and-so. Well, that means it's really inauspicious. Well, when Krishna kills someone, it's their deliverance. It's not their demise. They're delivered from the cycle of birth and death. King Yudhisthira became very happy after hearing the details of Jarasandha's episode. And he spoke as follows: My dear Krishna, O eternal form of bliss and knowledge, all the exalted directors of the affairs of this material world, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Lord Indra, are always eager to receive and carry out orders from you. And whenever they are fortunate enough to receive such orders, they immediately take them and keep them on their heads. O Krishna, you are unlimited, and although we sometimes think of ourselves as royal kings and rulers of the world, and become puffed up over our paltry positions, we are very poor in heart. Actually, we are fit to be punished by you. But the wonder is that instead of punishing us, you so kindly and mercifully accept our orders and carry them out properly. We are all very much surprised that your Lordship can play the part of an ordinary human being, but we can understand that you are performing these activities just like a dramatic artist. Your real position is always exalted, exactly like that of the sun, which always remains at the same temperature during both the time of its rising and at the time of its setting. Although we feel the difference in temperature between the rising and the setting sun, the temperature of the sun never changes. That's right, you leave it like that. You are always transcendently equipoised, neither pleased nor disturbed by any condition of material affairs. So, do you know why the temperature of the sun never changes, but yet we feel it hotter and colder? Yeah, because the orientation of the earth changes. It's rotating. Therefore, we feel it hotter and colder, but the degree of the sun shining doesn't change. It's very interesting. You are always transcendently equipoised, neither pleased nor disturbed by any condition of material affairs. You are the Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead. And for you there are no relativities. My dear Madhava, you are never defeated by anyone. Material distinctions, this is me, this is you, this is mine, this is yours, are all conspicuous by dint of their absence in you. Such distinctions are visible in the lives of everyone, even the animals, but pure devotees are freed from these false distinctions. Since these distinctions are absent in your devotees, they cannot possibly be present in you. So, basically, he's comparing the fact that the sun's temperature never changes, although it appears different on the earth. In the same way, Krishna is equal to everyone, although sometimes people see him as being kind to one and not kind to another. So that is all false. He's equal to everyone, and therefore Krishna says in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Samaham Savabhutesu Name Dveso Stina Priya. So he says, Ye bhajanti tamam bhaktya maite te suchapyaham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all, but whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. So, we can ask the question, if Krishna is equal to everyone, and no one is a special friend, then why does he take special interest in the devotees who are always engaged in his transcendental service? But this is not discrimination. It's natural. Any person in this material world may be very charitably disposed, yet he has a special interest in his own children. The Lord claims that every living entity, in whatever form, is his son, and so he provides everyone with a generous supply of the necessities of life. He is just like a cloud which pours rain all over, regardless of whether it falls on rocks or land or water. But for his devotees, he gives special attention. Such devotees are mentioned here. They are always in Krishna consciousness, and therefore they are always transcendentally situated in Krishna. The very phrase, Krishna consciousness, suggests that those who are in such consciousness are living transcendentalists, situated in Him. What does it mean, situated in the Lord? That means that they always follow the Lord's instructions. So someone who's not situated in Krishna, their symptom is that they will not follow instructions given by Krishna or his bona fide representatives. And those who are situated in Krishna, they follow the Lord's instructions, and they never violate the principles that the Lord is establishing. The Lord says here distinctly, Maite, they are in me. Naturally, as a result, the Lord is also in them. This is reciprocal. This also explains the words, Ye yatamam papadyante, tam stataiva bhajamya. No, leave it like that. That's right. Whoever surrenders unto me, proportionately, I take care of him. This transcendental reciprocation exists because both the Lord and the devotee are conscious. When a diamond is set in a golden ring, it looks very nice. The gold is glorified, and at the same time, the diamond is glorified. The Lord and the living entity eternally glitter, and when a living entity becomes inclined to the service of the Supreme Lord, he looks like gold. The Lord is a diamond, and so this combination is very nice. Living entities in a pure state are called devotees. The Supreme Lord becomes a devotee of his devotees. If a reciprocal relationship is not present between the devotee and the Lord, then there is no personalist philosophy. In the impersonal philosophy, there is no reciprocation between the Supreme and the living entity. But in the personalist philosophy, there is. The example is often given that the Lord is like a desire tree. And whatever one wants from this desire tree, the Lord supplies. But here the explanation is more complete. The Lord is here stated to be partial to the devotees. The Lord's reciprocation should not be considered to be under the law of karma. It belongs to the transcendental situation in which the Lord and his devotees function. Devotional service to the Lord is not an activity of this material world. It is part of the spiritual world where eternity, bliss, and knowledge predominate. So, the Lord promises protection to his devotees. Now, how does he protect his devotees? Well, you can tell who's not a devotee. A devotee is a person who doesn't follow the Lord's instructions. Therefore, in crucial situations, when they need those instructions the most, they ignore them. That's a non-devotee. And a real devotee is a person who the Lord blesses by remembering his instructions in those crucial moments when they need it the most. Now, in the case of Karna, he disrespected his guru. What happened? He was cursed to forget all the mantras that he learned from his guru in the crucial moments when he needed it the most. Therefore, he was killed in the battle of Kurukshetra. So therefore, Krishna says, Ye tamam papadyante tam stataiva bhajamya yaham. Whoever surrenders unto me, proportionately I take care of him. So, if we don't surrender unto the Lord at all, he doesn't take care of us at all. We're out there in the jungle of the laws of karma. But if we surrender to the Lord, and what is the symptom of surrender? Karishye vachanam tava. Whatever Krishna says, that's what we do. That's the symptom of surrender. whenever Krishna says, or his representative. So we can tell who is a devotee and who is not. The ones that are not devotee, even though they pretend to be devotees, are the ones that don't listen. They listen, but they don't follow. The ones that are devotees, they listen and they follow. And because of that, in the worst situations, they make the right decisions and they're protected by the Lord. That's the Lord's protection. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. He gives the knowledge by which we come back to Him. And for those people who are phonies, they ignore the knowledge by which they can go back to Krishna, and they make up things of their own, and they screw up their lives, as we say in English. They screw up their own lives. Now, this is further explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam in much more detail. And let's see if we can find it. Yeah, it says here, Canto 1, Chapter 7, verse number 5. Ya ya samohito jiva atmanam trigunatmakam paropi manute nartam tat kritam chavipadyate. Due to this external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the three modes of material nature, thinks himself as a material product, and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The root cause of suffering by the materialistic living beings is pointed out with remedial measures, which are to be undertaken, and also the ultimate perfection to be gained. All this is mentioned in this particular verse. The living being is by constitution transcendental to material engagement, but he is now imprisoned by the external energy. And therefore he thinks himself one of the material products. And due to this unholy contact, the pure spiritual entity suffers material miseries under the modes of material nature. The living entity misrepresents himself to be a material product. This means that the present perverted way of thinking, feeling, and willing under material conditions is not natural for him, but he has his normal way of thinking, feeling, and willing. The living being in his original state is not without thinking, feeling, and willing power. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the actual knowledge of the conditioned soul is now covered by nescience or ignorance. Thus the theory that the living being is absolute impersonal Brahman is refuted herein. This cannot be, because the living entity has his own way of thinking in his original unconditional state also. The present conditional state is due to the influence of the external energy, which means that the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. This is the key statement here. Which means that the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. Now, what does that mean? That means that when we disobey the instructions of Krishna, Durga Devi takes over. And what is Durga Devi's role? She punishes the errant living entities. And how are they punished? They don't make the right decisions. They make the wrong decisions. And they get deeper and deeper into trouble. It's very simple. It's not complicated at all. That's why Hitler chose to attack Russia, with which he had a peace treaty. While he did not complete the conquest of England, he decided to attack Russia. That was his fatal mistake. Because of that, he was defeated. Now, why did he do that? Because he got too arrogant, because he thought he knew everything, because he didn't listen to the advice of his advisors, and so forth. He was put into Maya by Durga Devi himself to make a fatal mistake. Same thing happened to Ravana. Why did Ravana get destroyed? He thought Ram was an ordinary person, even though he was warned by Surpanaka, he was warned by Marichi, he was warned by many people that Ram is not an ordinary person. He looks like a human being, but he's actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He ignored that information and thought he could neutralize Ram by kidnapping his wife Sita. These are fatal mistakes. Hitler attacking Russia, with whom he and Stalin had a peace treaty, a non-aggression peace treaty, and he attacks him, breaks the treaty. And therefore, he lost 1 million German soldiers on the Russian front. That's because of that he was defeated. And Ravana thought he could he could destroy Ram by stealing Sita Devi. He thought Lanka was impenetrable, that no one could attack Lanka. He didn't imagine that Ram could build a bridge from India to Lanka and come across it with a gigantic army, not of human beings, of monkeys. See, all these things are unimaginable because of overestimating oneself and underestimating Krishna's power. So, the present conditional state is due to the influence of the external energy, which means that the illusory energy takes the initiative while the Supreme Lord is aloof. So those people are miscreants. Miscreant means, as we said, they don't listen to Krishna's advice or Krishna's devotees' advice. Then Durga takes over and punishes them. How does she punish them? She gets them entangled in karmic reactions. She makes them forget. Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivisto, vatak smriti gyalam apahalam cha, vedaischa sarver helm eva vedya, vedanta krit eva chaham. I am present in the heart of every living entity, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So for those people who are miscreants, Krishna makes them forget when they should remember, and therefore they get into trouble. The external energy is aware of this fact. The Lord does not desire that a living being be illusioned by external energy. The external energy, or Durga, is aware of this fact, but still she accepts a thankless task of keeping the forgotten soul under illusion by her bewildering influence. The Lord does not interfere with the task of the illusory energy because such performances of the illusory energy are also necessary for reformation of the conditioned souls. Yeah, when someone's a complete rascal, the only thing they understand is suffering. They don't understand anything else. So therefore, Krishna lets Durga do her job. She doesn't like to do it, but she understands that some people will never be corrected unless they suffer terribly. And then there are some people that even though they suffer terribly, they still refuse to understand. The Prabhupada tells a story. There were once two people that got into an argument. And I think there were two Brahmins. Now, Brahmins, being a Brahmin doesn't mean one is a devotee. And Brahmins, especially false Brahmins, they cultivate, knowledge, not because they want to serve the Lord, but because they want to be famous or whatever. So they got into an argument about something, some point of philosophy. And it came down to a thing of whether you can cut something with scissors or not. So one of them went, yes, you can. And the other one said, no, you can't. And they went back and forth, yes, no, yes, no. And one of them just started choking the guy and said, yes, you can. And threw him into a river. And as the guy was drowning, he put his arm up and went like this. And he's dead. See, even in the last second, instead of saving him, trying to save himself with his energy, he's trying to make this signal. Sometimes you see people in prison, they come by the camera and they go. In other words, it's a victory sign, right? They're in prison, but they're giving the victory sign. That's the same thing. The guy goes like this, and then he drowns. So this obstinacy, this stupid obstinacy, is the symbol of some people who will never understand because they're too arrogant to understand. But other people, when they're defeated completely by suffering, they begin to look for understanding. So this is Maya's position. An affectionate father does not like his children to be chastised by another agent. Yet he puts his disobedient children under the custody of a severe man just to bring them to order. But the all-affectionate Almighty Father, or Krishna, at the same time desires relief for the conditioned soul, relief from the clutches of the illusory energy. The king puts the disobedient citizens within the walls of the jail. But sometimes the king, desiring the prisoner's relief, personally goes there and pleads for reformation, and on his doing so, the prisoners are set free. Similarly, the Supreme Lord descends from his kingdom upon the kingdom of illusory energy and personally gives relief in the form of the Bhagavad Gita, wherein he personally suggests that although the waves of illusory energy are very stiff to overcome, one who surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord is set free by the order of the Supreme. This surrendering process is the remedial measure for getting relief from the bewildering ways of the illusory energy. The surrendering process is completed by the influence of association. The Lord has suggested, therefore, that by the influence of the speeches of saintly persons who have actually realized the Supreme, men are engaged in his transcendental loving service. The conditioned soul gets a taste for hearing about the Lord, and by such hearing only, he is gradually elevated to the platform of respect, devotion, and attachment for the Lord. The whole thing is completed by the surrendering process. What's completed? Becoming free of misery, becoming free of suffering, becoming free of illusion, becoming free of recalcitrant, arrogant behavior, of ignoring, purposely ignoring the instructions of Krishna and the instructions of bona fide representatives of Krishna, and just doing whimsically whatever one thinks. The whole thing is completed by the surrendering process. Herein also the same suggestion is made by the Lord in his incarnation of Vyasadeva. This means, so Vyasadeva is saying this, he's saying, due to the external energy, the living entity, although transcendental to the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself as a material product and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. Now, I saw this in my own life. At one time, I was thinking that I belonged to a certain ethnic group. We speak our own language, we have our own customs, we have our own food, we have our own dress, we have our own traditions. And because of that, we have our own enemies and friends. You inherit enemies. Every race or every ethnic culture has their friends and enemies. So one time, I stayed with a person who should be my enemy. And I liked the person. He was really nice, and he liked me. And I was saying to myself, normally we should be enemies. But I can see there's hardly any difference between me and this person. It's very nice, he's affectionate, and he likes me, I like him. Why should he be my enemy? First of all, he never did anything to me, I never did anything to him. There's a history of things that happened before between two people. So I had thought about that a long time. Then I realized that this is something I inherited by being born in a particular family. I didn't do anything to him, he didn't do anything to me. But I inherited this friend and enemy. You inherit friend and enemy relationships with people just by birth in a particular family or a particular race or ethnicity. So that is thinking oneself as a material product, and thus undergoes the reactions of material miseries. When Jad Bharat took birth as a deer, he acted like a deer physically, but mentally he could remember who he was in his previous life and why he ended up with the deer body. And so as a deer, he stayed always in the association of saintly people, tried to eat the food that they would leave, and tried to listen to their discourses, even though he had the body of a deer. And I've seen this before in dogs and other animals. When I was in Vrindavan in 1973 or 4, our temple there was not finished, so there was no facilities for staying there. There was just one well where you could draw water from it with a bucket, and there was just one temporary toilet. And there was nowhere to sleep, so I was sleeping on a sand pile that they made cement from. But next to me every night was sleeping a dog. But the dog was asthmatic. Like that, he would breathe like that. He was very sick. He was dying of some kind of lung disease. And all night long, I would hear him breathe. I couldn't sleep very well. All night long, he was right near me. I was wondering, why would he stay next to me? But actually, he wasn't staying next to me. He was staying next to the temple. He never left the temple compound where the construction was going on. In the morning, when Prabhupada would speak, the dog, you could hear him. Like that. And he was standing not far away, listening to Prabhupada's lecture. And then when the devotees would eat, they would throw away their palm leaves, and they had some food on it. He would go and lick it and eat it. He stayed around all day long until he died. He was not an ordinary dog. He was an elevated soul. You could tell. So Maharaj Bharata became a deer because he thought of a deer at the moment of death. He misbehaved and broke all his yogic advancement by becoming affectionately attached to a deer after he had given up his family and children and everything. But therefore because he was an elevated soul, he could remember his previous life. So, as a deer, he always stayed around holy people, saintly people in the desert, in the jungles. And because of that, in his next life, he took birth as a human being. And as a human being, his name was Jad Bharat, he decided not to in any way interact with the material nature and compromise his spiritual advancement. So he acted as if he was deaf, and not deaf, but he acted as if he was dumb. So his father was a Brahmin. He tried to teach him Sanskrit and everything. He never learned it. He knew it, but he never learned it. And his father was very frustrated. And he had brothers. The brothers always made fun of him because he seemed to be mentally retarded. He wasn't. But he acted like that so he would not develop any attachment to the family. And during his whole life, especially after his father died, his brothers severely mistreated him. They cheated him out of his inheritance. They made him work in a very horrible way all the time, all the dirty tasks he had to do. So one night he was taking care of watching the fields and the animals while everyone else slept. And a group of Durga worshippers were looking for a human sacrificial victim. Because sometimes in Durga worship you have to sacrifice animals, and also you can sacrifice human beings also. So they were looking for someone who they thought was totally useless. And they found Jad Bharat, around midnight, just sitting there watching the fields. And they said, they knew who he was. They said, this guy's useless. No one's going to care if he's killed. So they grab him, and he doesn't protest. They take him to the temple of Durga in the middle of the night, where they're doing this tantric black magic ceremony, where they offer a human being. And then they bathe him, and they dress him in white cloth, and they take him in front of the deity, and they're going to cut his head off. And they start chanting some mantras and howling and dancing around him, and then they're going to cut his throat. And then when they put the knife to his throat to cut his throat, Durga Mata steps off of the altar. She's not just a stone deity. She steps off of the altar, kills each one of the dacoits, the so-called devotees of her, drinks their blood, and then goes back and stands on the altar. And Jadbarat saw the whole thing. He didn't blink an eye. And when it was all finished, there was blood everywhere. There were like 8 or 10 of them, maybe 12 of them, all dead. Yet she had drank their blood, so they were all shriveled up. He just got up and walked away and went back to watching the fields. So, he refused to make any compromise with the material nature because previously he developed, after giving up everything and living in the jungle and meditating on Krishna, he developed an affectionate relationship with a baby deer that the mother was chased by a tiger or a lion, and the mother had an abortion, and since a miscarriage, she dropped the baby deer and then jumped off a cliff to get away from the tiger or lion, and then she died. And then the lion walked away, and the baby deer was there, and Jadbarat picked up the baby deer and then started nursing it because, the baby deer didn't have a mother. The fawn didn't have a mother, so he was like feeding it, and he developed affection for it, and he developed a sort of insanity of strong attachment, feeling of protectiveness, protection for the deer, and day and night, and it just disturbed his yogic practices. And then one day the deer seemed to be lost, and he ran around the forest looking for the deer, and he slipped and something happened, he died. The last thing he thought about is the deer. So he takes birth as a deer. Now, as Jadbarat, eventually, his brothers treat him so bad, he just walks away. And one day, he's enlisted to carry a king on a palanquin. And while he's carrying the king with 3 other people, they're holding the palanquin, he's sort of, is moving around a little bit. And the king doesn't like the way he's moving because the king is moving a little bit. So he kicks Jadbarat. Now, Jadbarat had never spoken in his life. When the king kicks him like that, Jadbarat looks at him and says, "Who do you think you are? Sitting there as an arrogant person, mistreating people, thinking you're better than everyone." And then he preaches to him so strongly that the king realizes he's a great saint and realizes the mistake he makes. And he steps off the palanquin and bows down in front of Jadbarat and surrenders to him and accepts him as his guru. Very amazing story. So, we see that any type of compromise with the material nature will cause distress. The affectionate Almighty Father at the same time desires relief for the conditioned souls, relief from the clutches of the illusory energy. So what does he do? He comes in the world as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Krishna. He speaks the Bhagavad Gita. He gives the process, chanting Hare Krishna, and so forth. And he develops a society of devotees who preach and give their association. So the Lord has suggested, therefore, that by the influence of the speeches of saintly persons who have actually realized the Supreme, men are engaged in this transcendental loving service. Yeah, by listening to the discussion of devotees, discussing the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Gradually, by such hearing, one is elevated to the platform of respect, devotion, and attachment for the Lord. The whole thing is completed by the surrendering process. Yeah, I had to surrender. I joined the movement, and they told me I have to surrender to Krishna. That meant I had to follow their instructions. And 24 hours a day, every minute, I was told what to do. And I had to accept it. And because I accepted it completely, after some years, I was initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, this is only the beginning of spiritual life initiation. It's only the beginning. In other words, you haven't really begun until you surrender. And surrender means following the instructions of spiritual authorities. Herein also the same suggestion is made by the Lord in his incarnation of Vyasadeva. This means that the conditioned souls are being reclaimed by the Lord both ways, namely by the process of punishment by the external energy of the Lord, and by himself as the spiritual master within and without. So for those people who are nonsense, they get punished. And for those people who listen and follow, they're rewarded by having a spiritual master within, Krishna as Paramatma, and without the bona fide spiritual master who initiates or gives instructions. Within the heart of every living being, the Lord himself as the super soul, Paramatma, becomes the spiritual master. Yeah, you can feel the Lord is telling you, don't do this, don't do this. Right? I should check before I do something. You're feeling that. And that's another voice saying, oh, who cares? Just do what you think is right. You don't need to check by anybody. What do they know anyway? So you hear these two voices in your mind or your heart, and you have to decide which one you're going to follow. To follow like Ravana, following their own lust and greed and anger, or follow Krishna by accepting bona fide guru, shiksha, and diksha guru, and accepting their advice. And from without, Krishna becomes the spiritual master in the shape of scriptures, saints, and the initiator spiritual master. This is still more explicitly explained in the next sloka. Personal superintendence of the illusory energy is confirmed in the Vedas, the Kena Upanishad, in relation to the demigod's controlling power. Herein also it is clearly stated that the living entity is controlled by the external energy in a personal capacity. The living being, thus subject to the control of external energy, is differently situated. It is clear, however, from the present statement of Bhagavatam that the same external energy is situated in the inferior position before the personality of Godhead or the perfect being. The perfect being or the Lord cannot be approached even by the illusory energy, who can only work on the living entities. Therefore, it is sheer imagination that the Supreme Lord is illusioned by the illusory energy and thus becomes a living being. That's the Mayavadi's point of view. If the living being and the Lord were in the same category, then it would have been quite possible for Vyasadeva to see it. But no, there would have been no question of material distress on the part of the illusioned being, for the Supreme Being is fully cognizant. So, there are so many unscrupulous imaginations on the part of the monists to endeavor to put the Lord and the living being in the same category. Had the Lord and the living beings been the same, then Srila Sukadeva Goswami would not have taken the trouble to describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, for they would all be the manifestations of illusory energy. Srimad Bhagavatam is the summa bonum remedy for suffering humanity in the clutches of Maya. Srila Vyasadeva, therefore, first of all, diagnosed the actual disease of the conditioned souls, that is, their being illusioned by the external energy. He also saw the perfect Supreme Being from whom illusory energy is far removed. Though he saw both the disease-conditioned souls and also the cause of the disease, and the remedial measures are suggested in the next verse. Both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living beings are undoubtedly qualitatively one, but the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy, whereas the living entity is controlled by the illusory energy. Thus the Lord and the living beings are simultaneously one and different. Another point is distinct here. The eternal relation between the Lord and the living being is transcendental. Otherwise, the Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. In the same way, the living entity is also required to revive his natural love and affection for the Lord, and that is the highest perfection of the living entity. Srimad Bhagavatam treats the conditioned soul with an aim to the goal of life. So, now, the next verse clearly explains. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Truth. Okay, so it says here, we just read, that it is clearly stated that the living entity is controlled by the external energy in a personal capacity. That means the external energy is represented by Durga Devi. And therefore, for those people who are resistant to the Lord's instructions, she takes control in a personal way. And therefore, there's no escaping her influence for someone who is a miscreant. Trying to find something here. Okay. And then he says, personal superintendence of the illusory energy is confirmed in the Vedas in relation to the demigod's controlling power. Herein also it is clearly stated that the living entity is controlled by the external energy in a personal capacity. Let's see if I can find that verse in the Kena Upanishad. No, it's not here. Okay. KL. Okay, it's not here. So, Srila Vyasadeva saw the all-perfect personality of Godhead. This statement suggests that the complete unit of the personality of Godhead includes its parts and parcels also. He saw, therefore, his different energies, namely the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the external energy. He also saw his different plenary portions and parts of the plenary portions, namely his different incarnations also, and he specifically observed the unwanted miseries of the conditioned souls who are bewildered by the external energy. And at last he saw the remedial measure for the conditioned souls, namely the process of devotional service. It is a great transcendental science and begins with the process of hearing and chanting the name, fame, glory, etc. of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Revival of the dormant affection or love of Godhead does not depend on the mechanical system of hearing and chanting, but it solely and wholly depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. Some people say, well, I'll chant, and I'll chant some Hare Krishna, and I'll hear some classes. Ha ha ha. I'll look like a devotee. And everything will be all right. No. It's not, there's no mechanics involved in this. It's not a mechanical process. You chant and you hear and all of a sudden you become a devotee. Ooh. If it was that easy, everyone would become a devotee by phony hearing and phony chanting. That's why there are so many people that chant and hear and do nonsense. How is that possible? Because pure devotional service depends on pleasing the Lord. If He's not pleased, you can chant all you want and you can hear all you want. He will not change. It says, revival of the dormant affection or love of Godhead does not depend on the mechanical system of hearing and chanting, but it solely and wholly depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. When the Lord is fully satisfied with the sincere efforts of the devotee, He may endow the devotee with His transcendental loving service. But even with the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, there is at once mitigation of the superfluous and unwanted miseries of material existence. Yeah, if a person goes on regularly hearing and chanting, the miseries of life will go away. That doesn't mean they become a pure devotee. It simply means that they're relieved of temporary miseries. Such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledge. Rather, knowledge is dependent on devotional service for the ultimate realization of the supreme truth. Yeah, knowledge. You don't get knowledge and then you get devotion. You get devotion. You engage in devotional service sincerely, 24 hours a day, and then knowledge comes. Otherwise, it's like Karna. He was cursed so that when he needed the knowledge the most, he would forget it. And that's what happened. Because of that, he was killed. So, unless Krishna is really pleased by our service, not just mechanical activity, but sincere service, then we don't get the actual fruit of devotional service, which is love for the Lord and the Lord's special protection for us. We might get mitigation, temporary mitigation of material miseries, but we don't get that personal relationship with the Lord, because He can tell whether we're sincere or not, whether we're doing this for personal benefit or we're doing it to please Him. And to please Him, you can tell when He's pleased, because the spiritual master will be pleased with the service of the devotee. When the Lord is fully satisfied with the sincere efforts of the devotee, He may endow him with His loving transcendental service. But even with the prescribed forms of hearing and chanting, there is at once mitigation of the superfluous and unwanted miseries of material existence. Such mitigation of material affection does not wait for development of transcendental knowledge. Rather, knowledge is dependent on devotional service for the ultimate realization of the supreme truth. So in other words, Patyamam abhijananti yamanyaschasmi tatpata tatamam tatpato gyatva vishitetad alantaram. And Krishna says, it is only through devotional service that I can be attained. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So Krishna cannot be understood by mental speculation, nor by non-devotees. If anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has to take the pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. As stated already in Bhagavad Gita 7.25, Naham prakasa sarvasya. Krishna is not revealed to everyone. No one can understand God simply by erudite scholarship or mental speculation. Only one who is actually engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service can understand what Krishna is. University degrees are not helpful. Okay, and then it says, the Sanskrit word matpara is very important. Chetasa sarva karamani, maya sannyasa matpara. Buddhi yogama pasritya mat chitas tam bhava. 18th chapter, 57th verse, Krishna, in the purport, Prabhupada says, the Sanskrit word matpara is very important in this verse. It indicates that one has no goal in life save and except acting in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. And while working in that way, one should think of Krishna only. I have been appointed to discharge this particular duty by Krishna. While acting in such a way, one naturally has to think of Krishna. This is perfect Krishna consciousness. One should, however, note that after doing something whimsically, he should not offer the result to the Supreme Lord. Whimsically means not following the instructions of the Lord and His representatives. That sort of duty is not in the devotional service of Krishna consciousness. One should act according to the order of Krishna. This is a very important point. That order of Krishna comes through disciplic succession from the bona fide spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master's order should be taken as the prime duty of life. If one gets a bona fide spiritual master and acts according to his direction, then one's perfection of life in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. And the opposite is true. If one doesn't accept bona fide spiritual master and doesn't act according to his instructions, one's defeat in life or in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. So, we'll stop right there. If there are any questions anybody wants to ask. So we're reading the deliverance of Sisupala. Any questions? Okay, then we will stop right there. Thank you. All glories to Prabhupada.